It's February 1936, and 120 Japanese soldiers surround the estate of Takahashi Korikiyo, the country's former prime minister and current head of finance. Half of these men enter the compound, and confused servants lead them to Korikiyo's quarters, where they find him asleep in his bed. The minister is shot and slashed with a sword. He dies without waking. The specific cause of the assassination, as with many aspects of Korikiyo's legacy, are disputed, but there's good reason to believe that he was killed for attempting to remove stimulus from the Japanese economy. It is a dramatic illustration of an obvious concept. It's easy to turn on the money printer, but good luck turning it off. If you listen to any financial news, the one word you're sure to hear mentioned is tapering.
Tapering needs to come soon, no matter really what happens in this place.
At some point in the future, we're at least going to get more serious about possibly tapering.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a taper tantrum. I think it's not going to be a taper yawn. But it'll be it's just to be a taper weeping.
You see, during the global pandemic caused by the COVID-19 outbreak, the United States Federal Reserve began aggressively purchasing assets, something commonly called quantitative easing. The idea is that their participation in the market will lower interest rates, provide liquidity to banks, and encourage lending. All of these things are meant to push a floundering economy toward recovery. However, once the economy has experienced the rush of QE, or money printing as it's sometimes referred to, the process of taking it away can be a delicate one. This is why current U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell started talking about tapering while still potentially months away from actually doing anything. When the market, like a junkie, is addicted to something, taking it away can come with some very unpleasant consequences. The reason that tapering can be so scary for a market, even though it isn't even the cessation of asset purchases by the Fed, just a commitment to purchase less, is that it signals the beginning of the end. If the Fed is tapering, that means it thinks conditions are improving, and once conditions are improving, then eventually there will be increases in interest rates, and that is something that the stock market really hates. It's counterintuitive, but the economy that works best for the stock market might be one that's decent, but looks just fragile enough to make the Fed think twice about raising rates. In 2013, an event famously called the taper tantrum occurred when, seemingly out of nowhere, Fed Chair Ben Bernanke mentioned,
if we see continued improvement and we have confidence that that is going to be sustained, then we could, in the next few meetings, we could take a step down in our pace of purchases.
As a result of these comments, the stock market sold off 5% over the subsequent 5 days, and interest rates began to rise and would keep rising for several months. This experience is why the Fed is so careful with the wordings of their statements, and a couple words here and there can totally change the market's expectations of what they might do next. Back to Japan, though. How did things go so wrong? Well, they started by going incredibly well. The Great Depression of the 1930s was ravaging economies worldwide and had begun impacting Japan. This led to Korikiyo, 77 at the time, being called out of retirement to try and rescue the country. Korikiyo was a government lifer, having been prime minister once and finance minister multiple times. But he was not some silver spoon child destined for that sort of life. Listen to this incredible summary of his life exploits from the Wall Street Journal. The illegitimate son of a court painter, he studied English with American missionaries, then moved to California as a teen, where he was sold into indentured servitude and had to escape back to Japan. He once quit government for a silver mining venture in Peru, but returned home broke after discovering the mine had already been depleted. A rare Japanese Christian, he also indulged openly a fondness for sake and geisha. Anyway, Korekiyo had a three-pronged attack to staving off depression in Japan. He removed the country from the gold standard, lowered interest rates, and increased government spending. Removing the gold standard tanked the value of the Japanese currency, which was a good thing because it meant goods were cheap for other nations to purchase. Exports immediately rose as a result. Keeping interest rates low encouraged investment in businesses, and Korekiyo also argued increased the share of income going to labor. And direct government spending put money into the economy, which would in turn filter to other individuals and businesses, and those recipients in turn would increase their own spending. Japan was saved, at least for a while. But then the Depression had been staved off, and there was social unrest building. Among other things, people were unhappy because the benefits of all the stimulus seemed to be accumulating to the rich, whose assets value just kept on increasing. Simultaneously, all that spending was beginning to point towards looming inflation. Is it just me, or does all this sound kind of familiar? Anyways, Korekiyo decided he'd need to begin to rein things in a little bit to try to stave off that inflation. But he had a problem, one that was even bigger than what Ben Bernanke dealt with in 2013 or what Jerome Powell is dealing with today. Of all the excess spending that was being done by the government, more than half of that was military spending. This meant that when the spending needed to be reduced, that military budget was the first to get cut. As we've heard, this decision did not sit well with the country's military leaders. Sources I read were hesitant to put the assassination fully at the feet of economic decisions, since it happened in the midst of a larger coup of the entire government. For example, the Financial Times says, as political tensions exploded, he was assassinated by rogue army officers who were furious at, among other things, the military spending cuts. Regardless, the nation's leaders weren't ready to be the next one to try to bear the risk after seeing what happened to Korekiyo. No one dared cut spending, which led to continued massive excesses and ultimately inflation in the lead up to World War II. In the 1980s, this inflation was blamed on Korekiyo, with the Bank of Japan commenting that his actions were, quote, the bank's biggest mistake in its 100-year history. Ben Bernanke would have strongly disagreed with that, though. Not only were his actions taken during the financial crisis out of the Korekiyo playbook, but he had said in 2003, speaking in Tokyo, that Takahashi Korekiyo brilliantly rescued Japan from the Great Depression. He likely still believes that today based on his own results. The taper tantrum set off by Ben Bernanke's remarks in 2013 was ultimately just that. The stock market quickly shrugged off the news, and Treasury yields were on the decline by the time the tapering actions actually came into effect. Now it's Jerome Powell's turn to try and thread that needle. Succeed, and you'll wean the economy off of stimulus without incident. Fail, and, well, good luck. Thanks for watching, guys.